I want to tell you a little bit about my journey, because it was wayward, because it went in multiple different directions, and ultimately because of what I learned because of it. And hopefully there's something that you can take from that. Um, I always was in love with music, always. And I got my first guitar when I was age 10, and my mother heard me singing Tears on My Pillow by Kylie Minogue. And I started playing when I was 10, and I just fell in love with it. And shortly after that, I discovered Oasis, and they completely hijacked my attention. And I played and played and played, and it was all I wanted to do, genuinely. But I was also blessed with parents who know the intricacies, let's call them, of the creative industries and having a career in the arts. And they were really encouraging of me. I'm saying encouraging of me getting a degree in a different field, and also having what they called something to fall back on, which I was very against at the time. But at the same time, I was fascinated with humans. I was fascinated with the human condition. Um, I was fascinated with what made us tick. I was fascinated with what makes people hurt people, what makes people go so far as to kill another person. You know, what's going on in our minds, and what makes one person so different to another that they may have the capacity to do that, and that they get to the space of actually feeling like they have no other choice. And so, yes, I was always fascinated with people. Um, and so, as Sorka mentioned, I got my degree, I got my master's, I trained in psychology, worked with Tony Bates, and I worked in Jigsaw, which is the National Centre for Youth Mental Health, for 10 years, which was about making supports available to anyone and everyone, aged 12 to 25, no matter where they were in the country. The idea was that you could get support when you needed it, right? You didn't have to pay, and you weren't obstructed. So right now, if we ask anybody, you know, and it's getting a little better, but what do you do if you feel like you're going through a rough time? You know, what do you do? And it is getting better. People are having a better idea about what to do, but for the most part, people are not sure. I'm not sure. I don't know who to turn to. I'm afraid of getting involved in a system where I won't be able to get out of, you know. So what do? Potentially go to the doctor, potentially get prescribed antidepressants, right? And that's the end of their service engagement. So we have a broken system, but I'll get to that a little bit more later. Um, so I worked for that long, you know, and actually what I encountered quite regularly, almost daily, were parents speaking to me about their young children, they're teenagers, you know, they're young people, and asking me, I don't know what to do with him. He's depressed. I can't get him out of bed. I can't get him excited about anything. All he likes is his music. All he likes is his films, or, you know, whatever. There was always something. There was always something. He just seems to be just that into this thing, but I can't get him to do anything else. What should I do? You know, and I would work with these parents and I would work with these families and focus on what, you know, Patrick or Johnny's strength was. What does he, okay, well, what does he love to do? Why does he love to do that? What does that take him away from? What does that give him? How does it enliven him? You know, how does it give him life force? Because that's what we actually need to focus on. You know, he's turning away from something else, usually for a reason, right? And so that was my daily work. And I would go home and think, I really need to take my own advice. You know, I loved my job and I loved working with young people, but I also loved music, you know, and I had my own passion that was constantly shoved into a drawer, you know, to expend my energy on the few wee hours of the night that I would have when I would come home from work. And so eventually I got to the point where I thought, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to quit the relationship I was in. I'm going to quit the place that I live. And I'm going to go full hilt into this. I'm going to do music and I'm going to do it full time. And I did. I quit everything. And things went well for a while. And I got a manager. I pulled a demo together. I had an album almost recorded as a demo. And I got the attention of an American US label that were going to sign me. But the team that I had around me here, I started to feel like something was a bit off. And this is where the gut comes in, you know, and you will all have this in your careers and what you work in, when the gut kicks in, when the gut lets you know something's a bit off here, this doesn't feel entirely right. And so I started asking questions, and I got told to be quiet and just do what I'm supposed to do, like write music. And so I knew something was off. So I took the contract, I read it, I brought it to a lawyer, and he told me in unknown certain terms not to sign it. So the reason I tell you this is because everything fell apart then. Everything fell apart. The music fell apart. My confidence fell apart. I didn't sign it. They turned on me as well. So it was a very unpleasant time. And I felt like I'd lost everything. I felt like I'd broken everything. I also felt like I wasn't good enough, because if I was, I would have made this work. And so I didn't touch a guitar for about a year after that. I didn't sing. I didn't, sorry, I didn't bring my phone. Um, I didn't sing. I didn't write. I didn't actually engage with anything in the arts after that. And it was what could be known as an entire creative breakdown. And a creative breakdown more so around my sense of self, who I was. If I wasn't going to do music, what was I going to do? If I'm not a musician, which is what I so deftly identified as, I wanted so badly to be an artist, which is why I wanted to do it 100%. I didn't want something else in the way. I felt like I needed to do it 100% in order to be considered legitimate, you know, in the field. So it all broke, it all fell away. And those couple of years were some of the most difficult, because it was as though everything that I'd created, everything that I'd worked towards, everything that I thought I was no longer. There was a question mark over all of it. And it was from that point that I actually feel my real journey began, that the real honest journey began at that point. And it began with me quitting everything else. And I wasn't even working at the time. And I started to train in MMA. And one day, I was having days in bed where days would just go by and they would blend into each other. And one day, and this is what I talk about the survival instinct quite a lot. And I'd love to know your own experiences with the survival instinct, but it kicked in eventually. And I called, I called an MMA center, and it was up in a warehouse in Ossory Road in Dublin. And I said, can I come up? Um, I just really want to train. I think I really need to train. And he said, yeah, yeah, come on up. Yeah. He seemed a bit hesitant, but he went, yeah, come on up. I'm like, okay. And I said, just before he hung up the phone, he went, there's women there, right? And he went, no, but come up anyway. I went, okay. So I actually spent the next year and a half training in MMA with men in inner city Dublin in a warehouse. And I tell you something, I got my confidence back. I got my sense of efficacy back. Became part of a group that actually looked out for me. I reconnected with humankind. These men were, you can imagine, right? MMA, you can imagine they were scary at times looking, even just to see what they were capable of. And they were the kindest, most empathic, warmest people that I've met. And I suddenly found my belief again in human nature and in living and in connecting with people. And it restored my faith in so many ways. But my journey continued from there. I got all my anger out and I moved on, and I started to work in the criminal courts. I worked in aviation, and at that point I rediscovered music, and I rediscovered music in the form of composing. And that's where I began that journey. So I trained, I worked my ass off. I have absolutely not an iota of theory for music. So I did not know how it was going to work. And many people thought I was going to crash and burn, and told me so in the industry, which was which was interesting. But again, the learning curve, pushing past it and getting to the point where it worked. And so I've come full circle in a way. I started out with being a musician, being a psychologist, all of it fell away in the middle. Total breakdown, total throwing out of everything I trained for, wanted to be, learned, and studied for, and came right back to it. But came right back to both, you know, came right back to obviously join the Blizzards, and now working quite actively as a psychologist. I see clients for the last few years, And I also do talks like this to lovely people like you. And, you know, I think it's so interesting that I started out exactly the same way, but I am entirely different. And the process was what made this valuable, was what made this meaningful. And all that shit in between, I wouldn't think the way I do now. I wouldn't know what I know now if none of that had happened, if I had a smooth ride. And this is essentially why I talk about the importance of breakdown. Um, and you know, the arts, as you all know, and you know, and I'd love to know, and jump in at any point, anyone, and let me know what you do. But I have a sense that most of you are from the arts in some shape or form. You know, whether you're the actor, whether you're the stage manager, props manager, or the gopher, it doesn't matter, because your choice is to be in the arts, right? And that choice means that you're inherently exposed to other people's judgment, right? And so much so that it's so far beyond any other kind of job. You know, okay, yes, you get exposed to judgment if you worked in a corporate office 9 to 5, but it's judgment from your boss. You know, it generally gets retained within the four walls. But if you're creative, and if you're performing, and if you're putting something out there, your very essence, your very performance, your very sense of who and what you are and how effective you are at it is often reliant on what comes back, on what people think, on how people review you, you know, or how people engage with you afterwards. Do they book you again? You know, and that increases that sense of vulnerability. You know, the idea, and this is where it gets tricky, right? Because good mental health, good well-being, so much of it relies on your ability to see your own worth, independent of what other people think of you. But if your self-worth, if your own sense of value is inextricably linked to how others see you, then the moment they don't see that in you, your self-worth falls apart. Okay. And this is what we need to work on. This is what everybody needs to work on. Because if you're dependent on other people's reassurance, you know, and other people's investment in you and seeing the worth in you, and you don't see it in yourself, you'll consistently function in that brittle way. Your sense of self will be fragile. And this is why perhaps you do experience wide mood changes. You know, one day you're fine and one day you're not. But if you have that ability, and by the way, it's practice, we don't automatically have it, and we are a function of what we've been exposed to our entire lives from the moment that we've been born. You know, whatever, we're a function of our parents' upbringing, what they believed to be true about what it was to live, you know, about what it was to interact, about what relationships meant, how important they were. And what we see the world as now, how we see the world now, is a function of that, of what we were taught. And we develop coping methods. If our basic needs are not met, we develop coping methods. And, you know, if we are not loved in the right way, okay, if we're not loved consistently, if we're let down repeatedly, we develop coping methods. And those coping methods can keep people out in our adulthood, you know, and they work for a time. They worked when we were young, but they don't work anymore when we're adults. And this is why we end up in the same patterns, you know, some or most of us, in fact, encounter that at some point in our lives. God, why does this always happen? This always seems to happen to me. No, and we hear people saying that all the time. Well, it's a function of, you know, again, it comes down to what can you control? What can you control in this situation? We leave ourselves quite passive and powerless when we look to the other. And this is a little bit touches on what I wanted to talk about around culture and emotions. Um, we are shifting the narrative about mental health, you know, and we're talking far more freely about it, which is incredible. I mean, this stuff used to be pushed under the carpet. You know, oh my God, she had a breakdown. You know, we wouldn't speak about that. It would be, oh my God, you know, you wouldn't. And it was called a nervous breakdown as well. There was never any, you know, description of what she went through, you know, and it's always a case of, in what way, and this is our system, by the way, in what way are you broken? How are you broken? Now, I hope the way I say that, you can see the problem with it. You can see the problem with our mental health system, with our well-being system, in asking an individual, how are you broken? That's incorrect. That's incorrect. And over time, I do believe that this will change. In the next 5 years, there will be a big change. Because it's not how are you broken, it's what happened to you. It's what happened to you. And how has that impacted how you made sense of the world? How does that impact how you cope in times of stress, or times of challenge? Because it most certainly has. Whatever happened to you, wherever the power imbalance it was in your life, has impacted how you perceive challenges and stress, whether it's your family, your career, your relationships, pandemic even. How we cope in these situations is all influenced by what we believe to be true and what we've been exposed to up until this point. And that's why support for people, for all of us, needs to be about, tell me about you, tell me about your story, what happened to you, and let's try and make sense of that, and let's try and understand what kind of coping methods you developed that were helpful once but might be stopping you from forming meaningful relationships now, or from getting to where you want to get to in your career. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And the other part of the culture aspect is, we speak about how important it is to be honest, and that it's, that phrase, I'm sure all of you have heard it so many times at this point, it's okay not to be okay, and it's all good in theory, right? That's all sounds very good. It's okay not to be. But what does that even mean? And actually, when it comes down to it, we're still terrified of it. We're terrified to talk about not being okay. We're terrified to talk about negative emotion. We try to banish it at all costs. Everything that our society is built around is distraction. How do we distract from the negative? How do we distract from uncomfortable feelings? How do we bury ourselves in things so that we don't have to feel? And that was sort of why quite last minute there, I decided to do that little meditation, because it's that experience of tapping into, oh, I feel a bit of a niggle. Actually, I feel a bit irritated by this. Some of you might have felt that. Yeah, okay, now we're getting somewhere, because that's your true emotion. But we actually spend so much of our days running from that because it's uncomfortable and because we don't want to feel it. But this is what creates disorder. It's not the emotion itself. It's not the anxiety itself. It's not the sadness itself. It's the running away from the depression. It's the running away from the anxiety. That's what causes the problem. That's disorder. And the more we encourage people to not sit with discomfort, right? To constantly point or run to authority if someone or something makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable, we're creating disorder. And we cultivate a society, we cultivate fragility if we can't sit with that discomfort. And the more we avoid, the more we avoid, the more we avoid, the more we don't understand why we feel down, or why we feel sad, or why we feel anxious. And the more we think there just must be something wrong with me. That's not true. There's a reason for everything, for everything. But the longer we've been doing it, the longer we've been running, the longer we've been hiding, the longer we've been avoiding, the more difficult it becomes to unpick why we feel this way in the first place. But I can tell you something, there's always a reason. You're not broken. You're not broken. That's one of the first things I say to my clients, including clients who are really in the depths of it. You're not broken, but let's talk about what happened to you, because this is your way of coping. And so I also want to point out the fact that some of the, take the 9 basic emotions, that we have in existence. We've got love, joy, curiosity, anger, fear, sadness, guilt, shock, and disgust. Okay. So how many of those are positive? We've got love, joy, the rest are negative. Okay. We've evolved this way. These emotions are important. They're our compass. They help to guide us. And if we shut them down because they're not societally acceptable, or because we should be thinking positively, then we're denying what it is to be human. We're denying our experience of suffering in pursuit of something that's brittle and fragile. But it actually, and guys, people in theatre know this most of all, what you do is you take something You even take the mundane of existence, of life, and you repackage it into something beautiful that people can connect with in a new way. In fact, I always feel like theatre teaches people how to feel. And I don't mean how to feel, but I mean actually how to feel, how to connect with the feeling, right? And that's not what we're doing. And we're seeing quite publicly a hell of a lot of spiritual bypassing. I'm sure you've heard that term at this point, but it's, you know, the prophesizing about what it is to be human, about what it is to, you know, be enlightened. And we there's, the quotes are endless, right, about how to do this. And we are so up here, we're all up here in our heads. We know how to talk about it now. We know how to talk about mental health. We know how to talk about well-being. You know, we know how to articulate how to get to the space that we want to be in. But my God, we're not feeling it. We're not feeling it. We're bypassing the body. We're bypassing the body because this is where we hold. This is where we hold trauma. This is where we hold anxiety, all of our emotions. This is where we hold memories. We hold it in our bodies. And that's the other thing with doing something like the meditation that we did. You drop in and you start to feel it, right? Because it starts to reveal itself. When you connect yourself to what's going on in your body, you might feel a lot of discomfort because that's where it lives, you know? And, you know, I often talk about When the Body Says No, which is a book, a brilliant book, When the Body Says No, because the body will always tell the truth, always. The mind will find ways to escape, to avoid, to make you feel better, or to make you feel worse, because it's doing it in pursuit of trying to keep you safe. You know, we have evolved to do that. The mind is chattering all of the time. We have about 50 to 60, maybe even 70,000 thoughts a day. Sometimes 60,000 of those thoughts is the same one, right? Because we panic and we ruminate. But the mind is trying to keep you safe. And because it's so active and because it's so cerebral, we feel like it's correct and that we have to listen to it. But that's where we go wrong, okay? And this is the benefit of mindfulness, or any kind of space that you drop into the body, because here is the truth. And sometimes that's painful. But remember what we've already talked about avoidance. This is where you connect to what's really going on. Up here is just finding reason and rationale and logic, because we're so desperately in need of connecting to something that makes sense that sometimes we miss the truth in our bodies. And so if you take one thing away from this today, it's, can you connect more with your bodies? Get out of your heads. Get out of your heads. It won't take you anywhere great, really, when you're trying to connect with yourself. And sometimes it's the mind that creates the problem in the first place. So it's not the mind that will solve it. It's the body, you know, and sometimes it's not even language. It's just sitting with the discomfort and acknowledging it. Maybe crying, maybe just letting it out. I mean, can I ask if any one of you has had a complete sobbing fit in the last year where you've just absolutely descended into tears? Thank you for your honesty. I see hands going up. Descended into tears. I mean, snotty, ugly tears. Has any one of you felt worse afterwards? No, I see heads shaking. No. Mm-mm. You feel better, right? You feel better. That's the body. That wasn't irrational. I'm going to cry now and have water come out my eyes. That's your body going, oh, that's real. That's raw. That's passion. That's pain. It's, to live is pain, guys. You know, it's to exist is suffering. That's Buddhist. It is, you know, and we're always on this strange pursuit to happiness. You know, we open any magazine or online or paper and it's 10 steps to happiness, you know, and I even see psychologists putting that out and I always have a little eye roll, no offense to them, but you know, it's misleading. It's misleading and it takes you away from the experience of life. And thriving is not the same. It's not on the same spectrum as happiness at all. Fulfillment is not the same as happiness. In fact, reaching fulfillment in your life is very much at odds with happiness from time to time. Very much at odds with it. So get really clear on what you want. Get really clear on what matters to you. Okay, because if it's the pursuit of happiness all of the time, then you're missing out. You're missing out, because if you're looking for happiness, the chances are you're not going to walk into something challenging, right? That's going to maybe strip away your comfort, for a time. Maybe you'll earn less. Maybe you'll have to move somewhere that's uncomfortable, right? Maybe it'll challenge you in multiple ways. But are you looking for happiness, or are you looking for fulfillment? And generally, it's fulfillment that gives you that grounding in your belly, that sense of connectedness, that sense of purpose. And honestly, one of the greatest predictors of good mental health is having a sense of purpose, a belonging. It's one of the greatest predictors of good mental health. So connect to what matters to you and figure out what you're prepared to do to get to it. Figure out what you're prepared to do. And this is where I speak about the discomfort zone. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with its cousin, the comfort zone. And it's good. It's good for a time, it usually has a couch in it and God knows what else, but it feels comfortable, it feels safe, safe, safe. But usually, especially for, I'd say, most of the people who are logged on today, usually that niggle starts to pop up. Usually there's a drive to do, I'm just unhappy. I don't know why. I just feel a bit, I feel a bit antsy. I don't know what I want though, but and so that's the first stirrings of there's a different path for you. There's something coming up for you. You're looking for a challenge. And what happens? Usually we take steps. Okay, well, maybe I'll do this. I'll try this at least. So you move steps towards trying something new. Okay, and now you're excited at first and you're going, yeah, I'm going to nail this. This is definitely what I'm going to do. This is so much better than my current job. I'm going to knock this out of the park. And then you face exactly what it is that you have to take on. And it's staggering and it's terrifying. And you don't know if you're going to be able to do it. And self-doubt pops up and it's lashing you. It's lashing your heart, it's lashing your soul. You're worried. Your inner critic starts shooting its mouth off, right? And you're bloody uncomfortable. And you look back over your shoulder and you see the couch. And this is where most people turn on their heels and head back, right? And when people head back and choose to go back to their comfort zone, very often they can wake up 10 years later depressed, 5 years later depressed, and think, oh, I have depression, it's in the family. Nope, I don't buy it. And I never buy it. There's a function, there's a reason, right? The body says no. If you wake up depressed sometime, something happened. You've not listened to yourself at some point. There's needs that have gone unmet. At some point in your life, your needs have gone unmet. You've not listened to yourself, okay? And so when you move towards the discomfort zone, the question becomes, is this something I'm willing to cope with? Is this discomfort something I'm willing to have in pursuit of something that matters to me, right? That's the question to leave with. Am I willing to have this feeling in order to do what matters to me? Because we move around our lives and we get absolutely hijacked by thoughts and feelings all of the time, particularly because never before have we spoken about your feelings are valid. Your thoughts are valid. Your feelings might be valid, but that doesn't make them right. Okay, and that's really important to say. Your feelings might be valid about something, but you may be incorrect about what they're telling you to do. Right, and bear that in mind. Bear that in mind.